Welcome back. We are continuing our unit on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We are going to be talking about drugs and how they affect our health. So, what is a drug? I think people most commonly think of drugs as being things you might buy from somebody on the street, but there is a biological definition. It is any substance that causes a change in an organism's physiology or psychology when consumed. So it encompasses a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean something that is illegal that you find on the street. A drug can be many different things. So, what does that mean? What are types of drugs? There are prescription drugs. Prescriptions can be only obtained with a prescription from a licensed health practitioner. Typically, they're prescribed because they are either can be abused or have severe side effects. Just a lot of reasons why they are likely prescribed versus not available to the public. Over the counter means they're less likely to be misused. So things like aspirins or creams or cough syrup. These are also drugs. They have a physiological effect on us, and they are called drugs. There are recreational drugs. These are maybe more of what you might think of when you hear the word drug, but they are legal and psychoactive. Things like alcohol, tobacco, caffeine is definitely a drug. It has psychoactive and physiological effects. Marijuana is a recreational drug. Herbal preparations are drugs. They can have effects on our bodies, like teas and salves, creams. Think of things like home remedies that you might find from your grandmother. Your grandmother, your mother might have something at home that they give you that makes you feel better when you're sick. A lot of times these are herbal preparations. Illicit or illegal drugs, a lot of times this is what people think of when they hear the word drug. And these are generally recognized as harmful and psychoactive, things like heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, lots of things that you would find on the street or definitely things that are illegal and harmful and things that you would think of as addictive. Commercial drugs. Commercial drugs are an interesting category. They are commercially sold products that are not necessarily meant for human consumption, but when consumed by humans, cause a physiological or psychoactive response. So things like perfumes or cosmetics, household cleaners, paints, glues. Some people huff glues, inks and dyes. Some of these things do cause responses, even unnecessary or unwanted responses. So some people want responses from huffing paint. Some people don't want responses from things like dyes in their products. You might get a dye in your shampoo that you have a physiological response to, that you then have a reaction to. and that is something that you don't want. But that is still a drug, a physiological response. So drugs and health. Why do we have drugs? Why do we take them? And how do they affect our health? Well, the first synthetic pharmaceutical was made in 1897. It was aspirin. Before that, everything was more like these natural preparations, more like the things you would find from your grandmother, or more like things we would find from plants and say, okay, this is we know that this works from a plant and we're going to try to extract it. The first synthetic pharmaceutical was aspirin. We could identify what it was and then make it. So that was definitely the first kind of man-made drug. Since then, there have been really, in the last 150 years, have been a lot of incredible advances in drugs, in a wide range of health concerns, and have moved our health forward. We have drugs, everywhere from athlete's foot to helping with diabetes to helping put people under for surgery, so that then we can do major things and then give them even more drugs to recover from their surgery. So lots of health advances, and there are thousands of drugs on the market now able to prevent and treat and lessen the impact of ailments and to help us age longer than things that would have been fatal even just a few generations ago. At the same time, now that we have so many drugs, they are also interacting with our health by misusing them. We misuse drugs in many different ways. One way we've talked about before is antimicrobial resistance. We misuse antibiotics a lot. We take a lot of antibiotics and we're getting a lot of bacteria that is becoming resistant to our antibiotics. Other ways we misuse drugs is by becoming addictive, right? And taking more than we should. So there's a lot of things that concern our interaction with the way we take drugs and how we stay healthy with them. So how do drugs affect the body? How does this biologically happen? What happens in the body? How does it work? This is a very kind of simple way of thinking of it. If you were to go into pharmaceuticals, you would get more into this, but this is a simple way of thinking it. This is the principles of ADME, ADME. Absorption, distribution, metabolism, and then excretion. So what happens is you take a drug and you can take it in different ways. There's several different ways. I've mentioned a few. You can take it by pill. Lots of people in the pharmaceutical industry want to produce pills. We as humans like to take pills as opposed to getting a shot. Getting a pill, the absorption, the way it gets into your body is actually slow. Inhaling a drug is a very fast absorption into your bloodstream. Injections is also a very fast way to get a drug into your bloodstream. So those are ways they can think of ways to get things into your bloodstream. So after you absorb something into your bloodstream, it then gets metabolized or broken down in your liver, and it gets distributed. It can be distributed and metabolized, broken down. It wants to get to the places where it needs to go. So depending on how you took it and where you took it, if you took it orally, it might go throughout the body. If you took it by injection, a lot of times it will start at the injection site and then go throughout the body. Just depends on what it is and how you took it. Psychoactive drugs have another barrier. There's a blood-brain barrier that it has to get past to get to be interactive with the parts of the brain it needs to be interactive with. So once it gets to the place, it then needs to become active. And then when it's done, it gets metabolized and broken down by the liver and then excreted. And how does it leave the body? It can leave the body in different ways, through our urine. It can leave it through sweat. It can leave our body through all different ways. But this is kind of a simple way you can think of how we take medicine, the ADME. So we get absorbed. How does it get in? Distribution, where will it go? So where does it go? Does it go to the brain? Does it go to the blood distribution? Does it stay locally, depending on how you took it? Metabolism, how does it get broken down in the body? And then excretion, how does it leave? So there's many different ways to think of how drugs affect us. And a way to think of that is ADME. So we're going to, your book and us, we're going to look deeper more into psychoactive drugs, because we're going to go into addiction, which really has to do with the brain a lot. So we're going to cover more psychoactive drugs and how they alter our message signals in the brain. So that takes us to neurons. And if you remember, neurons are these long cells, and they communicate. They deal with communication in our brain. And we're going to look deeper into the transmission between two neurons and the neurotransmitter. So this is what it's going to look like, the long cell, and at where the two cells meet is kind of what we're going to look at. So we're going to look at the meeting point. So this is a zoomed in version of those two cells. So what is happening here with a psychoactive drug? So after you've taken that drug and it's been absorbed and distributed, and now it's made it to your brain, what happens in your brain to affect brain health? Well, normally what happens in your brain to make your brain happy and to do these neurotransmitters is, so when you get these pleasure centers, when you do something that you like, so like eating food or listening to rock and roll, or what else makes you happy? going for a walk or petting your dog, things that give you pleasure, make you happy. You then release dopamine. So your one cell here will release dopamine, and that's these little orange balls. And then your other cell is going to have dopamine receptors, and it'll feel that dopamine, and you'll get that dopamine hit, and you'll start to feel that euphoria. And this is what it normally looks like. And then once you're done with that activity, so once you're done eating your favorite food, mine is pizza. So once I'm done eating pizza and I'm kind of full and it's over, and maybe about an hour later, I'm done with that dopamine hit. The dopamine gets reabsorbed by this cell. So the dopamine is going to go back in here with these arrows. What happens in a drug-affected brain, so somebody that's maybe taking cocaine or cocaine for a little while, is it increases the amount of dopamine that gets sent out in between the space. So you're going to get a lot of dopamine. So your pleasure centers are like, fire, fire, look, this is exciting. Cocaine is exciting. It's even more pleasurable than pizza. And then where it starts to go wrong is cocaine itself, these red bubbles, start to block that dopamine uptake. So then dopamine can't be re-uptake. You can't be taken up back by the cell. So then we start to get brain dysfunction here. So then the cells start to become desensitized by dopamine. Things start to go wrong while using cocaine. Like all these things start to happen because you can't reabsorb that cocaine. So two things happen when you take drugs like this is you get too much dopamine at one time is number one. And then number two is you can't retrieve the dopamine from the space. So you can't get your dopamine back. Definitely watch this video that I linked here, and I linked it in the module. It'll show the animation of this for sure. It's a very good animation of how this happens. Okay, come back and we will learn more about how addiction works with the brain.